Hello there, duelists. Some things just make everyone feel good. A first sip of a morning coffee, or a big deep hug. Or milling Wulf off the top of a deck when you desperately need him. Today we have Lightsworns on the playmat. Lightsworns are an ancient archetype from 2008, who have always had people building them from their conception, from a pure meta build to an engine for rogue strategies. Lightsworns have seen play for the past 13 years, and I fully expect the same from the next 13. So let's see what they can do right now. Okay, so into the monsters. So first up, obviously, I don't really think any Lightsworn deck is worth its salt if it's not playing through Raiden. This was released a bit after the kind of like initial splurge of Lightsworn cards, but it's so fundamental, mostly because it can mill not during the end phase, which I think was one of the things that really kind of slowed the tempo of the original Lightsworns down. So Raiden can mill 2, and then during the end phase he can also mill another 2. He gains 200 attack, I believe, or is it 100 attack for each Lightsworn that he mills, so he can get up to 1900. And he's a tuner, which is very useful. From there, I'm playing 3 Lumina, Lightsworn Summoner. Now, I know most people have cut this from, you know, kind of Lightsworn decks, and I get why, it's a hand-track magnet, but I think the extension that it can put on, and kind of like the way that a lot of the deck's built is that you need to get cards out of your hand to replace them with more useful cards. So I think Lumina's just a really solid extender and a good starter as well. From there, we're playing our mill special summon cards. So we're playing 3 Wulf. So can't be normal summon a set, which works well with some of the other cards we're playing. And then if it's sent from the deck, sent to the graveyard, then you can special summon it. And then we're also playing 3 Felis. So Felis is very similar to Wulf. If it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon it. And then you can also tribute Felis, mill 3 cards, and then destroy a card on the field. So it's not bad for spot removal as well. And that's it for the kind of Lightsworn, portion of the deck. I get that's only 12 cards, but I just don't think a lot of the other Lightsworn cards are worth running and don't put enough advantage or pressure on the opponent. So we've got a healthy dollop of chaos. So we're running 3 Chaos Dragon Levianeer. So banish 3 light or dark monsters from your graveyard. It gains effects based on the attributes of it. If it's all light, you can special summon from the graveyard, which is pretty decent for going first. If it's both light and dark, you can destroy up to 2 cards on your opponent's side of the field, which is kind of non-targeting, which is nice, and is also very good for for kind of going second and breaking boards. And then if you just banish darks, which I think rarely comes up just because of the limited number of darks that we actually have in the deck, you can rip a random card from your opponent's hand, which again is not bad going first. You can summon Levianeer more than once per turn, but you can't use his attribute-based effect when he's summoned more than once per turn, so you've got to be careful about that. From there, running 3 Chaos Valkyria. So this can be special summoned by banishing a light or dark monster, so it really gets the ball rolling. It's a level 4 light fairy, which is it has applications throughout the rest of the deck. And if it's banished, you can send a light or dark monster from your deck to your graveyard, but you can't activate that card's effects for the rest of the turn. So, it's got capabilities when you banish it as well. From there, we're running a few one-offs. So I'm running 1 the Chaos Creator, 1 Black Dragon, and 1 corresponding White Dragon. And that rounds up kind of like the Chaos package. So the Chaos Creator is the standard, Chaos summon where you banish a light and a dark monster from your graveyard. And then you can target 3 banished monsters, special summon 1 of them, and then shuffle the remaining 2 back, put them back on the bottom of the deck in any order you choose. So it's a good way of kind of recycling some of your cards. He's decent, but I don't know. I think he's not worth running more than 1 of, and he's searchable via some of the cards in the deck. So I think he's a great card, and I have considered running more than 1, but I couldn't really find the space. Black Dragon and White Dragon have very similar card effects. So you banish a dark for the White Dragon and a light for the Black Dragon, nailed it. And then when they're sent to the graveyard, they can search for the others. They're absolutely unreal cards for advantage. And I mean, when these guys were at more than limited, it was absolutely unreal. Actually, look, thinking back on it, like I was gutted when these guys got limited, but they're absolutely, you know, card advantage at crew is just insane. So they're really solid cards. So that rounds up the kind of chaos bit. From there, I'm playing a little Performage engine with 3 Hat Tricker. So special summon it if you control more than, well, sorry, if there's more than 2 monsters on field, so that includes your opponent's monsters. And then he's also got a counter effect where he can go up to 3,300 attack, but it just never happens. From there, we're playing 2 Damage Juggler and 1 Trick Clown. So Damage Juggler is kind of, he's an interesting card, Damage Juggler, because he's got some hand trap almost effects. If your opponent attacks, you can discard it to reduce the damage to 0. If your opponent activates a card effect that would do burn damage, you can discard it to negate the activation and destroy it. But his main thing is if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to search for a Performage card. And then Trick Clown obviously is kind of like, I suppose he's been in rank 4 engines and stuff like that quite a bit, but if he sends to the graveyard, you can pay 1,000 life points to summon a Performage card back, and it becomes attack and defense of 0/0. So these are really good cards. If they get milled, you can still get advantage. And I would say that's, you know, we've also got kind of, I suppose, our last little bit, which is kind of just like a mill cards. So we've got 2 Destiny Hero Malicious, so banish a Malicious from graveyard to summon it. And with the Chaos Creator, you can kind of shuffle back in one of the banished Malicious to carry on, you know, extending with Malicious. 1 Plaguespreader Zombie and 1 Dotscaper. So Dotscaper, if it's banished, you can special summon it, and if it's sent to the graveyard, you can special summon it. You can only use each one of them once per turn. Its downside is that it's Earth, so you're not really getting that banish effect off, but it's still a solid card. Plaguespreader Zombie, if it's in the graveyard, you can put a card from your hand back on top of your deck to special summon it, but it's banished when it leaves the field. So that rounds up the monsters. As you can see, there's quite a lot of them, and there's kind of a healthy job for chaos in there and some mill cards as well. So I suppose anyone who's after a pure Lightsworn deck may be disappointed, but I just don't think it's unfortunate. It just doesn't run, you know, anymore. And I think a lot of it's reliant on its normal summon, which is obviously, you know, really sad. Okay, right, so into the spells, and as you can tell, we're not running a huge amount of these. So 3 Charge the Light Brigades of completely different sets, I believe. Charge the Light Brigade, send top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and then add a level 4 or lower Lightsworn monster from your deck to your hand. It's a great starter. In fact, all of the spells are really good starters. 3 Solar Recharge. Discard a Lightsworn monster, draw 2 cards, and then summon the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Again, a really good starter, and it's kind of why we're playing quite a lot of the, you know, brick Lightsworns, I would say, just to get off, you know, the mills. It's just, you know, it does mean that you are, I suppose, more susceptible to luck. but that's kind of the nature of Lightsworns anyway. So I'm kind of trying to maximise our chances of milling a card that's gonna extend. And then finally, we've got 3 Chaos Space, which is a really, really, really good card. So send a light or dark monster, and then add a light, the opposite one that you sent from your hand to the graveyard, from your deck to your hand, that can't be normal summoned or set. So yeah, you can search the Chaos Creator by sending a light, or you can search Chaos Valkyrie by sending a dark. And then when it's in the graveyard, you can shuffle a monster that can't be normal summoned or set from your banish zone into your deck and draw a card. So even though you're kind of taking that neg on activating and getting the search, you're hoping that in the end you're going to actually kind of break even and add some consistency to the deck. A lot of the cards, as you've seen, don't really mind on being in the graveyard either, so you know, it's just a really solid addition. And I can't imagine a Lightsworn deck, or at least a Chaos one, without this card at 3. Okay, and then on to the extra deck. So I think a lot of this is kind of toolbox, so you can kind of personal preference it should you want, but I'm running 1 Michael, 1 Dawn Dragster, and then 1 Borreload Savage Dragon for my synchros. So Michael, you can pay 1,000 to target a card on the field and banish it, which is decent kind of non-destruction removal. Obviously it still targets, which, you know, has got its pluses and negatives, but you know, I think it's worth running. And then if it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can shuffle back in Lightsworn monsters to gain life points, which doesn't come up that often, I have to admit, but it's not bad. Occasionally it happens. Dawn Dragster, you know, spell or trap, negation, and Borreload Savage Dragon is kind of, you know, what you're aiming to get, you know, kind of on you going first, kind of end board. Running a few XYZs, so I'm running one Minerva, one number 60 Dugares the Timeless, one number 106 Giant Hand. So 106 Giant Hand, bit of a toolbox. You could choose whatever you want there. You know, target a card on the field, detach, negate. I'm also running Abyss Dweller as kind of another kind of generic rank 4 that can, you know, that just puts on some pressure on your opponent, especially on some, you know, certain types of deck. Number 60 Dugares the Timeless, I think, is actually a really crux card here, like being able to summon something back out of the graveyard and carry on extending, you know, with his second effect to detach 2 to special summon 1. Obviously, it means you end up skipping stuff. You know, even his draw effect to detach 2 to draw 2, discard 1 is also very, very decent. So yeah, I think he's a really good utility club, is number 60. Minerva is a great stepping stone, I would say. Her kind of destruction effect doesn't really come up that often, but, you know, being able to detach to mill 3 is super solid. And then rounding up, we're going through the link monsters. So we've got one Barricadeborg Blocker. Sometimes you just need to be able to discard. It's also a dark monster, so sometimes, you know, it's quite useful to put in a dark in graveyard that you don't really mind banishing. One Knightmare Phoenix and one IP Masquerena. So Knightmare Phoenix, I'm actually using quite a lot just to stop my opponent being able to beat over stuff, you know, if you co-link it with some of your other cards. Spell and Trap Destruction is obviously, you know, decent. IP Masquerena is just a really good card to end on, so you can disrupt your opponent during their turn. And then for the link 3s, I'm running one Curious, the Lightsworn Dominion, and one Knightmare Unicorn. So obviously Knightmare Unicorn kind of targets spin, and that goes hand in hand with Masquerena. Curious, it's a bit of a nightmare to summon, if I'm being honest, but this deck manages it quite well. So you've got to have, I'm going to nail this, 3 different types but same attribute. I always get type and attribute mixed up, but when it's summoned, you can send a card from the deck to your graveyard, and then if a card's sent from your deck to your graveyard, you can mill 3. So you get, you know, 4 cards in graveyard just by summoning Curious, and then if it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can add a card from your graveyard back to your hand. But again, we never really end on Curious. You know, it's kind of like we don't sit on it as part of our end board, so, you know, that effect rarely comes up. And then I'm running a few link 4. So I'm running one Saryuja Skull Dread, which I've got to be honest, I think it's weird. This card was once something that everyone was egging on to get banned, and now it's kind of fine. But I still think it's got its usefulness. One Knightmare Gryphon, so, you know, Curious, then go to, I don't know, Knightmare Phoenix, and then get Gryphon that points at it, and then have a Borreload Savage Dragon above that. You know, being able to lock out your opponent's special summon monsters' effects is, you know, it's really, really rough. So, you know, if you get the right setup with Gryphon, it can be a game ender. And then finally, the one Apollousa, Bow the Goddess, just a kind of generic negation. Lightsworns have the ability to build and break boards. With a bit of luck, any deck is going to have a tough time. However, on the flip side, if you don't have Lady Luck on your team, you can just fizzle out, or even brick entirely. So with that balance in mind, it's a 3 for meta relevance. Obviously, that doesn't mean that they're never going to win a duel, but I think in like a competitive tournament over multiple rounds, I think your consistency is you're going to start becoming an issue. The fun factor is also a tale of 2 halves. Those brick hands are all the more frustrating when you know the deck can pop off so hard on a good day. But milling those perfect cards off the top feels so good, and navigating the lines is a puzzle in itself. So it's a 4 for the fun factor. With many of the cards having multiple prints, the deck is actually fairly low cost, especially the Lightsworn segment of it. And for the power ceiling, I'd definitely say that it's a decent mid-budget option. I've estimated at about $210 for this deck. So are you guys still rocking the Wulf mill, or has Lightsworns had its time? Thanks for watching, and check out the channel for other videos.